So we left off with Jacob and Esau, and Jacob stole Esau's birthright. And we went into the Greek-Roman conflict that arose, and how at the end of the wars between them, that Rome ended up inadvertently gaining the title of protector of the Greek freedom, which essentially means that Rome was now the new position of power. It had stolen the birthright of the Hellenistic world. So that would be chapter 25. In chapter 26, we're going to kind of, at the beginning of this, we're going to not go over it yet, because 27 will force us to go back, and hopefully it'll make more sense backing into it than plowing through it. Because Genesis sort of, you have to understand Genesis before it makes sense. Because if you don't, which I guess nobody does, it just sort of seems like it's telling a story, it's going off on a tangent, it's back to the story. But it's like the tangents are never as tangential as one might assume. So we're gonna come back to that one. Chapter 27 is the one where Isaac blesses Jacob. And this is probably one of the more famous stories of Jacob, and we'll kind of cover it, and we'll cover it, and you'll see the traditional understanding, and then hopefully I will make this, I guess I should say this up front. As I've been sort of preparing for this, like when I did my Noah stories, I had to do Cain, Abel, Seth, Noah. Like it was at least 4 videos of, I don't know, 6 hours of content in order to get the story out in a way in which I still feel like I left a lot sitting on the table. This one chapter, actually, what is not well known, or hopefully I'll make it more obvious, is 27, 28, and 29 are all sort of bleeding into the same story. So this is actually, and then when I said 26 is actually part of it, we're actually looking at almost 4 chapters to tell the story of Isaac blessing Jacob. Now, my entire everything is that all of the Bible stories are basically telling you historical moments using mythical people to tell actual history. At least that's my contention. So if this one story is bleeding all over into 4 chapters, but the story itself seems pretty small, then historically speaking, we can assume that this might be a significant historical event known to almost every person I can imagine. You just didn't know that it's the story of Isaac blessing Jacob. And I'm going to say this too. As many outlandish things as I've said so far, and we can be honest, there's plenty of outlandish things. This one is gonna take us into some strange territory. And I'm gonna say some things, and I'm gonna mean everything I say. I want to mean everything I say, but it's gonna sound fantastical. Not supernatural, but just fantastical. Like, I'm gonna tell you I have photographs of your wife cheating on you. Like, fantastical. Like, your husband actually has another family 3 states away with, like, family albums and vacations, the whole nine. Like, you're just gonna go, how did we get here? One Bible verse at a time. 1 year at a time. One historical event at a time. So, I'm not even 100% sure how this is just going to happen. It's probably going to take me several sittings. Hopefully you'll never know it, but it's a weird thing inventing or interpreting, or I can't go watch somebody else do what I'm doing and then do it slicker than them, because there's nobody saying what I'm saying. And if you hear somebody saying this, then they saw this video and stole it. So I have to sort of, I'm like inventing, like there isn't a godfather of this genre that I can fall back on. So this is like, if I'm not careful, I will spend hours and hours giving history lessons. There's thousands of people doing history lessons on YouTube. You probably didn't click on this because you wanted to know only the history lesson, right? If you've watched more than one of these, while it may be outlandish, the back of your head is saying, fuck, why does that make sense? Like, why does he seem honest? If you want, I can talk about today's sponsor. This episode of Scott the Revelator is brought to you by abso-fucking-lutely nobody. There's no money in this. There's no prize in this. So if you're hearing this, this is purely like there's no more honest truth that I'm trying to reach. Right? I've made some mistakes. I'll make some mistakes. But everything I'm saying, these are conclusions I honestly reached without somebody paying for them. Like I'm just literally using up hours and hours and hours of my life because maybe like you, I've looked at so much of this, and it's just been sort of like, it just all seems like a bunch of fucking shit. Just, it's a messy web that doesn't make sense. If I go to church, I can get down with the church thing, but if I look into like history, then I have to go, wait, that's all wrong, the church thing. And then if I just go the what do they call those, material atheist route, and then I look over at the spiritual people, I'm like, you idiots, you morons. And then if I get into like this esoteric stuff, and like before you know it, it's like crack, it's like meth, it's like fentanyl. Esoteric belief systems is the fentanyl of humanity. And hopefully this story will will tell you that too. So like, only knowing esoteric secret dark knowledge will ruin your soul. Like, that is the enemy. That is the addictive crack of the universe that spills into religion, and it turns out that's spilling into the history, and then that esoteric shit just drips hard on science. I haven't done any of that for you yet. Like, if you look at science, and I'm talking numbers, you can't avoid the esoteric. It becomes super uncomfortable. And we'll get to that, hopefully. I've started and stopped at least 666 times. So yeah, strap in. This is, if you hear what I'm saying and don't just find all the things that are wrong with no, it's not perfect. I'm not again, I'm getting paid $0.00 for, well, you decide how much time it must have taken me to it, even if I'm full of the most shit that you'll ever see, right? I genuinely believe what I'm about to say, but let's say you just hear and go, that guy's crazy. Fine, let's say I'm crazy. This insanity that you're about to hear would have taken me, just think of the number of things that I must know that I'm putting together that don't belong together, but at least I know about them, right? So I'm going to create connections for things that I shouldn't be. There's a word for that. So I'm like, oh, his level of insanity is up here. Yeah, it took me a long, this is a lifetime of, or half a lifetime, of compiling information and then running it through my own AI, and it's spitting out like, oh, like we may start with Jacob, but that is not where we finish. So let us jump over and start looking at the beginning of Genesis 27. This is the story where Isaac blesses Jacob. And it begins with this verse. Now it came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he could not see. So I want to I want to kind of like highlight some things that you should be thinking about. Number one, when Greece, right? So Isaac is ancient Greece. When ancient Greece had gotten so old that his eyes were so dim that he could not see. So we've been adding to our little vocabulary of words that when you see in a verse, you go, oh wait, that actually means this thing. Eyes. And you will see how apropos this will be at some point, hopefully. And if you watched my Cain and Abel video, I went off on a seeming tangent about some esoteric symbolism and crosses and X's and eyes, stars, and some other things, some Babylonian, Sumerian religious symbols. Eyes would be, let's call eyes something like leaders, maybe thought leaders, maybe priestly, but priest is a loaded term that may or may not have religious connotations. So when your eyes are so dim that you couldn't see, it means you're blinded. And if a man is a country, and the Bible even has some verses about this, imagine there are parts of that body. And one of those parts would be the eyes. In fact, it even tells you to cut off your hand and gouge out your eye if it causes you to sin. To sin. Sin. I believe that was the moon god. And we'll get there shortly. So when your eyes are so dim, right? I was just looking for an image. This is like the most, I think I literally Googled esoteric eye. Like, I don't have any idea exactly if this even means anything other than it's kind of like, well, that's a cool tattoo. But you get the idea that that's an uncomfortable way to think about an eye in a pyramid, and an eye. When your leaders have become blinded, your culture is no longer this fresh, vibrant thing that it used to be, and the people that keep falling into positions of power have long ago given up on creating something cool and are now it's just a gross power move. Everything is just power, which is kind of what we stumbled into in the Noah story, right? I think that was one of my more profound moments that if you had heard, like, shit, that should be a viral clip. When you break down the sons of Noah, and I had gone into how Noah was actually the Akkadian Empire, but the sons of empire, the sons of this empire, the first empire, are the sons of all empires. And so when you have the children and the descendants of these people, which, if you noticed, I did not do, but if I did do it, and I will at some point maybe, they don't have to be linear or chronological. If you understood what I was saying, those words meant. Shem, Japheth, and Ham meant, like, Shem was this amazing, glorious thing, this beautiful, shining Japheth is when everybody gets behind this new cool fad, like, yeah, enlargement, right? So Japheth meant enlargement. So it's like how countries and empires and ideas and fads are born. You have like a cool new idea, and then it catches on, and then Ham would be like, where now it's just trying to live off, their number one hit in 1970. Like, guess you still gotta make a living. It's no longer that. Fidget spinners. Do you remember when they were at every checkout counter during Japheth? And now if you saw a fidget spinner, you would. So, when your eyes are so old, you are definitely, you're a son of Ham at this point. You are a piece of shit just trying to hold on to a dying empire. Sorry, America. This is why I'm saying this is so complicated that I'm not even 100% sure how I do this. Because I want to show you some of the things, but let's just plow through some verse and come back to this. So after he said it, he couldn't, his eyes were dim and he couldn't see, that he called Esau his older son and said to him, "My son," and he answered him, "Here I am." So remember, Esau is not ancient Greece. Esau is Hellenistic Greece. More importantly, like the Eastern Greeks. And that becomes very important at some point. Then he said, "Behold, now I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, and that my soul may bless you before I die." And there's like 50 verses to this one chapter, and we're on verse 4, so you can see that this is complicated. There's so much in those 3 verses, but it just seems like nothing, right? Now, if you've bothered to watch the videos, you could probably compound a half dozen things that I've said out loud. There's lots more that I haven't said, so I want to go back and just look at those real quick. "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death." Death. Death is another word. Death is, in fact, there's so much to death. We had talked about how Pharaoh was the king of the dead, and that tied into corporations, and there's even more. Like, it's not my opinion. For example, Hades. For example, Hades. Hades is the god of the underworld, god of the dead. So Isaac didn't know when he was going to be dead. Is he speaking of Hades in the underworld? And remember, when we talked about Cain and Abel, we also talked about the descent of Inanna and how there seems to be this recurring story within mythology of death and rebirth, but especially in the descent of Inanna. Inanna had gone down to the underworld, but then she had to be rescued and pulled out of the underworld because she went to the underworld to get power from her sister. But she was willing to sacrifice her husband to gain the power. And it's interesting that Inanna's a woman and her husband's a man. So the woman, the culture, was willing to sacrifice the people to continue the culture. And if you can get your head around some of these like esoteric crack that I told you, like let's say you were initiated into a Freemasonic lodge. They would teach you some deeper things. I'm assuming, never been there, but I've done enough looking. And how deep you want to go is probably dependent upon how curious you are to ask questions. So if you're cool with like a silly story, well, it's probably not for you. But like, this is just one word. So what I'm showing you is like this idea of death. And not only is it the underworld and how we've connected the underworld to Pharaoh and the Pharaoh to corporations, the corporations to money, it's even more direct connection than that. Like, this is just the super quickest search. Hades was the king of the underworld and god of the dead. He presided over funeral rites and defended the right of the dead to do burial. Hades was also the god of hidden wealth of the earth. From the fertile soil which nourished the seed grain to the mined wealth of gold, silver, and other metals. Hades, king of the underworld, god of the dead, and riches, giver of wealth, god of wealth and fertility. And remember, the fertility story is always where the goddess in the stories, right? She's the fertility goddess who's always married to the god of the underworld. So Isaac doesn't know when he's heading there. So that's just one word. And the dead in Christ shall rise, and the dead shall be judged. Like, has overcome death. Like, these meanings aren't nothing. Jesus died and rose from the dead. Again, we're circling Jesus, so there's some revelations in Jesus right there for you. Just that word. So let's go back to where we were. Come on, I'm on the day of my death. Now therefore please take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me and make me savory food. Now therefore please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and we're going to come back to these in just a second, and go out to the battlefield and conquer for me and bring me some of that red stuff. Right? So we can expect that Isaac is asking Esau to go do some conquering. Now we've already passed Macedonian War, so we are now, whatever that was, 170 BC. So everything that we're going to, this verse now must fall post Macedonian Wars. So we are at least in the 160 AD BCs, if not later, right? This is not every year chronicled. It's something there's something I want to show you in that little piece as well. So this is that same little thing that I had used before for the Noah story, where we were breaking down some of those original Hebrew words in this Genesis story. Now we're still in Genesis, and just want you to see, and this is that verse we just read, and therefore take please your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt for me game. But I want you to see with the word weapons, right? So weapons for, we're Americans, we're English speakers. When I have a weapon, it's pretty limited to what a weapon is. But let's take a look at weapon. An article, utensil, and vessel. Almost nothing of what I would think of as a weapon. Now, it can be armor, armory, but then it gets kind of strange. Bag, baggage, basket, bowls. These are earthenware, furnishing, goods, jewels, pottery, sack, vessels, utensils. Oh, there's some weapons at the end. Huh. That's a weird one. So what if we just had something like, let's go back to that verse. He said, therefore please take your vessels, please take your containers, your quiver and your bow, and go out into the field and hunt game for me. It's a weird one. I wonder what it means. Well, for the sake of today, what I'm going to do is we're going to hold off on that, and we're going to, when I mic drop this thing, then that word will make a little more sense. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau, his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt game and to bring it. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob, her son, saying, indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau, your brother, saying, and bring me game and make me savory food for me, that I may eat it and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. It looks like Sarah might be going to Hades too. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to what I command you. Go now to the flock and bring me there 2 choice kids of the goats, and I will make savory food from them for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall take it to your father, that he may eat it, and that he may bless you before his trip to Hades. So, let's talk about the word flock. If you go to the flock, in our metaphorical sense, that would be the people. So go to the people. Go to, in this case, it's Jacob. So Jacob, go to Jacob's flock and bring me from me 2 choice kids of the goats. That would be young goats. And what's a goat? If you have sheep and you have goats, that's a big one, right? Everybody always there seems to be this inherent knee-jerk reaction to say, sheep good, goats bad. And that doesn't seem terrible. And what's a choice kid? What's a kid? So that's a young goat. So an extra delicious young goat. So we'll get to what all that means as we go forward. And I will make savory food, and that kind of reminds me of the bowl of stew that Esau demanded. And that bowl of stew ended up being, what did we say? It was like that military potency. It was like that taste of victory. So somehow Rome is supposed to go to the people and find 2 young goats so that his mom can kill them to give Greece a taste of victory. Because you shall take it to Greece, and Greece will eat your young goats. And I told you that we were, what did I say? Like I said, it's chronological, but not like it's important moments in a trajectory, in an overall story arc. Like when you read a book, you don't read about every mundane minute of a character's life. You get, the important ones that you need to know that generates the plot. So in this case, I am going to say, and this is like twist 1, but if you've been following the other 2 Jacobs, you're like, okay, well this follows in line. So Rebekah's there, which means Rebekah is the culture of ancient Greece. And we had said what all those, like the classical Greek culture. And one of those important things that you have to learn to like pick up on this is you just need to instinctually know that Rebekah is democracy. So if is like ancient Greek democracy, which means that if we're talking about Rome and Rebekah's hanging out, well, by God, you know that we're still in the Republic, right? We haven't crossed the Rubicon. If you get that joke. So here's the part that I'm a little frustrated with is Roman history is very accessible. There's experts in Roman history. And for me to talk like what is that whole meme thing in the last year or two where does your man talk about the Roman Empire? Like apparently there is enough interest in the Roman Empire or Rome and Republic, or oh hey, how did the Republic turn into an empire? I think if you understand that question, that's what this story is. That's why I'm saying this is a major historical event that's going to take a little bit of like, for example, like I was trying to just watch a few videos to see if I could grab some clips, which I'll probably try, of people talking like you got to do the first triumvirate, then you got to do the second triumvirate. Well, in between it, whether first triumvirate, the Caesarian civil wars, all the battles that go into that, Caesar, the death of Caesar, the second triumvirate, Mark Antony, Octavian, Cleopatra's in there throughout the whole thing, the death of Mark Antony, the rise of Augustus, like just to go from the Republic, and then how do you even get the triumvirate? So then you got to build the backstory to where are these three people from? Who's Crassus? Who's Pompey? Why is that important? Like that's a ton of stuff. And I'm trying to tell you it's the story of Isaac blessing Jacob. So like, this is what I'm saying. I could either spend, and I've watched, like those videos are 20, 30 minutes per section. Some of them are like 3 hours per section. You can go to college and that's probably a course. The fall of the Roman Empire. Like that's probably one college course. You don't want to hear me explain that. Now what I am going to do is I did find somebody, and I want to give you full credit, whoever you are. They did it's like a 1.5 minute video of the first triumvirate, and I thought, fuck it, I'm not making any money on this, so give this person thanks for taking an insane amount of things and just putting it into a little chunk where you can go, oh, okay. So Crassus didn't like Pompey? No. Oh, Caesar was in Gaul? Yeah. Caesar was part of the people's groups. He wasn't part of the old Roman. Yeah, and that's all important. Like there's so much of this that you just, I don't know how the Bible did it, but they're amazing. So let's watch this video real quick.
This is Jordan with Knowledge HQ, and today's 60-second history will look at the political alliance known as the First Triumvirate. So without further ado, let's put 60 seconds on the clock. The First Triumvirate is the name given by historians to the political alliance formed during the Roman Republic between Gaius Julius Caesar, Gnaeus Pompey, and Marcus Licinius Crassus. This alliance was formed in 60 BC, in large part to combat political enemies in the Senate led by the conservative Cato. Cato had worked to deny Caesar a triumph for his fighting in Spain, he had prevented Pompey from completing his recent victories in the East, and he had denied Crassus desired financial legislations in Asia Minor. The alliance was solidified by the marriage of Caesar's daughter Julia to Pompey. Once formed, the Triumvirate dominated Roman politics, ultimately giving Caesar a lengthy command against the Gauls, Pompey a command in Spain, and Crassus command against the Parthians in the East. Despite its success, the alliance crumbled with the death of Crassus in 53 BC, although the death of Julia in childbirth the year prior had already caused a divide between Caesar and Pompey. Rather than renewing their alliance, Pompey chose to side with Cato and the conservatives in the Senate. By 49 BC, they would be fighting against Caesar in a bloody civil war for control of the Roman state. Thank you for watching.
So now I should be able to show you this image and you kind of at least, let me just say, I recommend that you go do some Roman research for this because it will help all of my points make sense. So I am unfortunately operating on a place where I know all of these things that I'm making connections without saying them, but go look. So Caesar Pompey Crassus, right? That's the first triumvirate. And then let's just continue reading Genesis, right? Because Rebekah just asked Jacob to go get 2 choice goats. And Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "Look, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself, not a blessing." And again, this is just chock full of things. Esau, meaning hairy, is a hairy man, and hairy meant something like a conqueror. So basically, Jacob's saying, hey, classical culture, Esau has taken more of a conquering king role. I'm more of a republic. Perhaps my father will touch me. Perhaps Greece will touch me. And I will seem fake because I'm not a conquering king. I'm a republic. And then I'll just bring a curse on myself for pretending to be something I'm not. But his mother said, "Let your curse be on me, my son." And just, this happens occasionally in the Bible where somebody will say these sort of like ominously karma phrases. You're like, are you sure you want to say that? That if you go back and look, there's a good chance this curse fell on her. Just saying. Only obey my voice and go out and get them for me. So only act as republic and go get these kids, these goats. And he went and got the goats and brought them to his mother. And he brought them to the republic. And his mother made savory food such as his father loved. So there must have been a battle, and some kicking ass must have taken place. Then Rebekah took the choice clothes, remember garmentry, big time, of her elder son. So she took the clothing of a conqueror, of a hairy conquering king. She took that clothes, which were in her house. And like, I can't stress enough, every one of these words is a damn gold mine. So you just have to keep these in mind. So somehow, the classical republic concept took the clothing of a conquering king, which were in her house, and her house always means geographical boundaries of a country associated with the man. In this case, the man she's married to is ancient Greece. So inside of ancient Greece, she had them with her in Greece. Just remember that. And put them on Jacob, her son. So she's going to put on the goat skins, the hair in Greece on her son in the story. And if you know anything about the next part of the Roman story, alarm bells should be going off. And if not, you should go watch a bunch of these videos and see what I'm talking about. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. And Genesis is full of what I'm about to show you. What we just read is a visual description. She put the skins of the kids on his hands. I'm telling you, Jacob is a country. How do you put skins on a hand and on a neck? You almost need a map for that. And let's just, before I go to this map, how many hands do I have? I have 1, 2, and a neck makes 3. And if you're in a triumvirate, that's 1, 2, and a neck makes 3. So she put the hair, she put conquerors. At this point, they're not kings, they're not Esau, but they are hairy goats, choice goats. One could call them rich, important, set apart from the sheep. Right? They're not sheep, these are goats. These are 3 rich Romans at the end of the Republic Empire sharing power. Let's call choice kids rich, powerful men. And maybe the whole group associated with the man. So it's not just Crassus the person, but Crassus the entity. Pompey and his armies and his followers. And if you research this more, you'll see that there's the different sides of the Senate and how they had been having gang wars in Rome. And so it's not just Caesar, it's Caesar and the popularity. It's Crassus and Pompey and Cato and Cicero in the Senate and all of the people that still were holding on to this concept of elite control, like everybody should be coming from an aristocracy, whereas Caesar is more of this people. It's almost a Republican Democratic split, right? That's an old thing. So the goats in this case are two of these 3 people. 2 of the 3 are needed. 2, which would leave 1 goat goat. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands, on Jacob, on Rome's hands. So Rome must have, if you're literally following what I'm saying, on one of the hands of Rome, which is a fucking weird statement until you see it, there should be Pompey, and on one of the hands should be Crassus or Caesar, and on one of those should be on a neck, on the neck of Rome and on the hands of Rome. Drum roll, please. And there you go. This is a map of the First Triumvirate. You have on the hands of Rome, you have the army of Pompey, you have the army of Crassus, and you have the army of Caesar on the neck of Rome. That's what I'm talking about. How many of these things is it now? Like, we're still stacking. I'm not even remotely done stacking. In fact, we're not even done with this story stacking. So, if you follow the story, I showed you the setup, but you can go find the rest of the story. But basically, Crassus, over here, I'll show you the map. Crassus, who decided, for whatever reason, and if you watch enough of the videos or read enough books of Roman history, you'll see that Crassus was the richest man in Rome. He was the choicest of choice goats. But he wasn't like Pompey, who was the most famous man in Rome. And why was Pompey famous? Because he was the most kick-ass guy in Rome. That man was the conqueror's conqueror. He was like super stud supreme. He got to break all the rules. He was the man. Crassus was just super rich for various reasons. Again, go look into it. He was the man. And Caesar had been kicking ass in Gaul, and he came from a very important family, and he was a very important man. So Crassus had decided that, man, Caesar and Pompey, these guys are conquerors. I should come over here, and I'm going to go, and there was something called the Mithratic Wars, I don't know, I'm not saying it right. With the Parthian Empire, and it didn't go well, and Crassus dies. But something to notice is this, we had been talking. In fact, this is something that I need to bring up because it becomes uber important for the rest of my unraveling. Esau, just a few verses ago, was told to go out and hunt himself. And we had said Esau was the Hellenistic world. But the very video before this, thanks to the Macedonian-Roman War, at least Macedonia had fallen under Roman control, which, if we're just going to look on a map, right, this was Roman. In fact, everything here is red as Roman. So what would have been left would have been the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire. So you would have had this much left of Esau. But if you know your history, you would have known that the guy who's colored over here actually was famous for coming over here, and he was the one that did most of this conquering right here. So Pompey was this super stud because he had already conquered Judea, Palestine, Syria, that area. In another complicated, interesting story that we're not going to get into. So the only thing really left of Esau, for Esau to be told to go hunt, is Esau is now down to this. This is all that is left of Esau. So it's a very specific. And I told you we're going to skip part of the bow and the quiver and the but this needs to be built into the back of your head. You need to understand the time frame of which this is talking about. So it's actually saying, hey, Egypt, go conquer for me. And that'll become important fairly soon. Oh, and I think I hadn't finished my rambling. So what ends up happening is Crassus comes out here and decides to go pick a fight. It doesn't go well and he dies, which leaves 2 people left. And so ultimately what you end up having is this civil war between Pompey and Caesar. And the Senate sides with Pompey, and Caesar is sort of left out to dry. One thing leads to the other, and all of a sudden you went from a mismatched Pompey's going to win this thing by a mile to all of a sudden it's 50-50, neck and neck. This is a close one, and they have to go fight up in Gaul and over where Spain is, and then hold on, let's read some more. Then she gave the savory food and bread, which she had prepared, into the hand of her son, Jacob. So she has taken this, right? This is the savory food is like, it's the fight. It's the 3-way fight that's turned into a 2-way fight. And she gave that food and bread. So now there's this fight, this sense of like glory, and bread, right? So there's men in glory. That the classical republic was brewing up, not the empire. This is all under Rebekah's. This is her kitchen. She's cooking up men in glory and giving it to Rome. So she's basically saying, hey, go give this to your dad. Go give this to Greece. So he went to his father. He went to Greece. Rome went to Greece in the middle of the glory, the men in glory brew, to give this glorious stew, this glorious war, this conflict is going to go to Greece. And he said, here I am. Who are you, my son? And Jacob said to his father, I am a conqueror. I'm your hairy king. I am the hairy king. I am the conquering king. Esau, your firstborn. I have just done as you told me. Please arise, sit, and eat my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, how is it you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, because the Lord your God brought it to me. And he said, because the people gave it to me. They wanted this. The people. And at the heart of Sulla, Caesar, this Pompeian Caesar civil war is literally popularity aristocrat. And he was the Caesar, the man of the people. The people. God gave me this fight. But Isaac said to Jacob, please come near. So you're going to see this throughout. And I say the Bible's not literal, but in this kind of context, I want you to imagine literally Rome came near to Greece. Literally, physically. Rome went to Greece. That I may feel you, right? So close they can touch him. Whether you are really my son, the conquering king, or not. So Jacob went to Greece, his father, and touched him. Rome was physically touching Greece. I told you this thing's fucking amazing. The voice is Jake. You sound like a Roman, but you're sure acting like a king, like a conquering king. And he didn't recognize him because his hands, his hands and his neck, these three armies vying for power, conquering each other, sure felt like Esau, but boy, they sounded Latin. So he blessed him. I wonder what that means. Well, let's go back. Then he said, are you really my son Esau? And he said, I am. I am a conqueror. I am the conquering king. Then he said, bring it near me, and I will eat of my son's game. Come over here, and I will be part. I will eat. I will eat of what did we say this was? Of this glory. I want this glory to physically touch me, and I want to ingest it. And he ate, and he brought him wine. Right? Wine is connected with woman. Wine. He brought him this new culture of glory. So Isaac is now consuming the glory of Rome. Then his father said to him, come near now and kiss me, my son. And we have to, I know we've been talking about field. Field is where you battle. But kiss, I told you, is also war. So come and kiss me. Fight. Bring the fight to me, my son. Come on, Greece, and fight with your glory and your bread and your new wine of Roman glory as opposed to the Republic. You're now here to conquer. Before you were just defending, but now this is the new wine. And he came near and he kissed him. That means he fought. And he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, "Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Surely the smell of Rome, my son, surely the smell of the offspring of Greece is the smell of battle which the people have blessed, of glorious battle." That's the smell of his son Esau. But Jacob smells like that now. Therefore, may God give you the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. I want you to become the greatest thing that's on high and rich and full of all the important culture and people. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. This sounds like the blessing of empire. Nations will bow down to an empire, and the people will serve in the empire. An empire is master over the other countries around it because it's the power. Rome was the master. And your mother's sons bow down to you. Your mother's sons? Well, that would be... Didn't your mom just have one son? But she had one son in the form of Esau who was broken up into at least 4 separate things. So, yes, the Greek world will come to bow down to you. And everybody who fights you or curses you will be cursed. Anyone who blesses you will be blessed. And that's how being the dominant world power works. Your friends benefit and your enemies don't. So before we do that, I want to take a look at something about what we just talked about. So what we are referring to when I was talking about how Rebekah had made the stew, right? So the Republic had gone into this fight for glory between Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar. Crassus makes the wrong decision, and you end up with a civil war. It's called Caesar's Civil War between Caesar and Pompey. And you should go look into why it was caused. And so basically what you're going to notice is where this war is fought and where the decisive event where Rome took what Rebekah had, took the bread and the stew to Isaac, and he brought this fight to Greece.
We often use the words decisive battle to denote the engagement that brought the end of a conflict or quickened it, but some battles transcend that as they change the fates of entire empires or civilizations. In 48 BC, the Great Roman Civil War was approaching its high point, with Caesar and Pompey maneuvering around Greece. The Battle of Pharsalus would pit the old friends against each other yet again, with the whole Roman world in balance. Pompey still held the upper hand. He had more local support and supplies, and so his intention was now to avoid another confrontation with Caesar. Caesar, on the other hand, had wasted no time. He marched quickly to Gomphi, an important town with many supplies, and home to the praetor of Thessaly, Androsthenes. Androsthenes had previously promised his and Thessaly's support for Caesar, but following Dyrrhachium had defected to Pompey, closing the gates of the city to Caesar. Caesar did not have the supplies or time to conduct a prolonged siege, so he decided to storm the town. The attack started at 3 in the afternoon and was all over by sunset, a number of nobles, likely including Androsthenes, committing suicide. Despite their defeat at Dyrrhachium, Caesar's veterans were still a force to be reckoned with. After resupplying, Caesar marched to Metropolis, which surrendered upon hearing the fate of Gomphi. Many other towns soon followed suit, and Caesar soon had enough local support to resupply his army for the time being. Caesar was equally confident though. His army was not as numerous, but it was more experienced and disciplined. Only a handful of Pompey's legions were true veterans, many having been recruited specifically for the war and only having seen their first action at Dyrrhachium. While the bulk of Pompey's infantry were Roman legions, they were supported by auxiliaries and allies from the east, making up the majority of light infantry and cavalry. These men, though all skilled warriors, would not have been trained to fight in the Roman style, and the multitude of languages spoken in Pompey's army would have made coordination difficult. The men Caesar had under his command were from his 10 veteran legions, all of whom had fought with him since his Gallic campaigns, some for as many as 12 years. Every day, Caesar would march his army out of the camp to the base of Pompey's hill, offering battle. Pompey each time refused to commit, pulling his men out of camp but never moving from the high ground. It was clear that he was still not wholly committed to a pitched battle and did not want to give up his advantageous position. It had been almost a month now since the Battle of Dyrrhachium, and Caesar eventually decided that if Pompey would not give battle, his best strategy would be to keep his army on the march, moving camp every day, forcing Pompey to shadow him and wearing out Pompey's less disciplined force. On the 9th of August 48 BC, Caesar was about to put this plan into action and had his army prepared to decamp, when Pompey's army suddenly moved off from their position on the hill to the plains to give battle. It is not entirely clear why Pompey chose to do this. The most likely answer is that he was pressured by his supporters who, upon seeing Caesar ready to move, were worried Caesar would slip away and had pressed Pompey to seize the opportunity and give battle. Whatever the reason, Caesar took it as a blessing and also prepared his army for a battle on now even terrain. Pompey positioned himself on the left. His plan was to use the tactic of his hero, Alexander the Great. With Ahenobarbus and the river guarding his right flank, Pompey's infantry would hold the line while the entire cavalry force would flank left, destroying Caesar's cavalry before falling on his legions from behind, becoming the hammer to the anvil of the defending legions. Caesar was the one to begin the engagement, ordering his front 2 lines to charge Pompey's. Caesar's men expected Pompey's infantry to countercharge, as was standard military custom, but they instead stood fast holding their line. In a brilliant display of discipline, Caesar's men spontaneously halted mid-charge and reassembled. After a brief pause to regain their stamina, they moved slowly forward, only breaking into a charge once again when nearer to Pompey's line. Javelins were hurled from both sides, and Pompey's men, braced and with interlocked shields, held the line. An intense melee ensued with brutal close-quarters fighting. Pompey now put his plan into action. Labienus led the Pompeian cavalry to Caesar's right flank, supported by the skirmishers and archers, smashing into the Caesarian cavalry. Caesar's men could not hold off the onslaught for long, gradually being forced back before retreating entirely. They had, however, performed their role. Whilst Pompey's cavalry had been fighting with Caesar's, Caesar had given the order for his fourth line of spear-armed infantry to wheel around and face Labienus and his cavalry. The Pompeian cavalry had been preparing to charge Caesar's legions in the rear, but with Caesar's cavalry acting as a screen, they hadn't seen Caesar's fourth line move into position, and now they found themselves being attacked by 3,000 heavily armoured spearmen. Pompey's cavalry, though numerous, were not heavy cavalry, and many were young nobles with little experience of warfare. Fighting veteran spearmen head-on was not something they were cut out for. They were routed quickly, being forced to retreat to the distant high ground to try and regroup, but the damage had already been done. Caesar's fourth line pushed on into Pompey's missile troops, easily crushing them. As they pushed on, it was now Pompey who was being flanked. His left-flanked legions, both who had previously fought alongside Caesar and his legions, now found themselves attacked on multiple fronts by their old comrades, the 10th Legion from the front and the 4th line from the left flank and rear. It was at this point that Caesar committed his third line of fresh troops, throwing every man he had into the battle. Under this huge pressure, Pompey's line began to break, starting with the 1st and 3rd. This was also where Pompey had stationed himself, and almost becoming surrounded, he had little choice but to flee the battlefield and retreat to his camp. The rest of Pompey's line broke in quick succession, Caesar's 4th line rolling up the flank, while his fresh 3rd line pushed from the front. Some attempted to follow their general and retreat to their camp, others simply fled the battlefield. Caesar, knowing his victory needed to be complete, stormed the camp, easily overwhelming the few thousand reserves and men who had retreated. Those that had retreated from the battlefield were soon surrounded on a hill and forced to surrender. Caesar had won. Caesar showed his customary leniency to Pompey's soldiers as well, with more than 24,000 surrendering to him. In total, Caesar claims to have lost 200 men and 30 centurions in the battle, while giving the Pompeian losses as 15,000 dead and the 24,000 surrendered. These numbers seem suspiciously exaggerated, and Appian suggests it was more likely 1,200 of Caesar's men dead and 6,000 of Pompey's, the rest surrendering or fleeing. Whichever is closer to the truth, the fact remains that Caesar's victory was decisive. Aside from having broken Pompey's largest army, he had scattered the Pompeian officers, many fleeing to North Africa, and absorbed many of Pompey's surrendered men into his army, almost doubling its size. Pompey himself sailed first to the Greek islands of Lesbos and Mytilene, meeting his wife Cornelia and his youngest son Sextus. His intent was to get his family far away from Caesar, and use his connections in the east to rebuild an army to resist Caesar. By the time he reached Cyprus, he had taken out private loans and put together a fleet along with 2,000 men. His defeat, however, had cost him much public support. Pompey had initially planned to head to the province of Syria, but they turned against him and he was forced to look elsewhere. He decided on Egypt. The boy pharaoh Ptolemy XIII owed his throne to Pompey, Pompey having supported Ptolemy's father and guaranteeing his will that made Ptolemy pharaoh. Pompey had also lent a number of officers and soldiers from his eastern command to the pharaoh's army. Confident he would find support there, Pompey sailed to Egypt. He was met off the coast by a small rowing boat, which would take Pompey to shore. Aboard were a man called Savius, the head of the Egyptian army Achillas, and an ex-officer of Pompey's, Lucius Septimius. Pompey's wife was worried about this lack of pomp and suspected something was not right, but Pompey was reassured by the presence of Septimius. Stepping off his ship, he quoted a line of Sophocles to his wife: He who enters a tyrant's door becomes his slave, even if he leaves a free man. As the small boat rowed to shore, Pompey tried to alleviate the tense atmosphere, telling Septimius he was an old comrade. He received only a nod of recognition in response. Septimius then struck, stabbing the old general, quickly followed by both Achillas and Savius. Septimius then beheaded his corpse, throwing the body naked into the sea. Ptolemy, upon the counsel of his advisors, had betrayed Pompey in order to try and win approval from Caesar. When Caesar reached Egypt having pursued Pompey, he was first presented with Pompey's head. Disgusted, he turned away. He was next presented the seal of Pompey, at which point Caesar broke down in tears. Though enemies in later life, it is worth remembering that Caesar and Pompey had been political allies for around 8 years, had effectively ruled Rome together, and had even been related by marriage. Caesar was well aware that, despite being his enemy, Pompey had been a titan of his time, worthy of his respect. Caesar's victory marked a turning point in the war. It was now the Optimates who would find themselves on the back foot.
So in Greece, in Isaac, Jacob comes and feeds him the glory of Rome, where he overwhelms his enemy. He kills the second choice goat and becomes Caesar, right? So it's still Republic. Rebekah's still there. We're going to move into the full transition, right? That's why it's the First Triumvirate. And I told you this thing takes forever, but I think this is an excellent place to kind of like, we'll call this part 1. And but here's the things that are lurking, right? So we haven't finished this chapter, but we sort of like barreled through, but then I kind of built it up a little bit, and then we barreled through again. Esau is out there hunting his own hunt. But the only thing left of Esau, because when he went to Greece, he didn't go to Esau, he went to Jacob, because Jacob is Greece. So the only thing left of physical Esau is Egypt. And you will see, especially in this next chunk, that all of this, it's crazy how good I mean, go back and watch this again if you're missing this. Go catch up on some history, come back, rewatch this, and just let your brain melt. Enjoy the choice savoriness of goat.